Interesting when we talk about business and football, immediately we start to think about European football. And yet when I was a kid, in fact, when I was a university student, even later than when I was a kid, football was something that you did with a ball. You kicked it around, and it was something that friends did together. And it's something that people from the local community gathered together to do, to kick a ball around, or to talk about it, or to watch it on TV. And it's really only over the last 25 years, as the Premier League has taken hold and the Champions League has taken hold, that many people now think in terms of it's business. It's about making money. It's about commercial opportunities. Because, you know, if you cut me open, and you look at my blood and my DNA, it's about my dad, and it's about my friends, and it's about the part of town that I used to live in. It's not about money. So I think there's still sufficient room. There is still sufficient space out there for us to define what we mean by football and to engage with it in a way that suits our purposes. The other example I would use is of Chinese football. And as Brian knows, I've got a big interest in football in China. And so the Chinese government sees football as a means through which to build the population's soft skills. So independent thinking, creativity, team working, decision making. And so it's not necessarily about who's got the biggest sponsorship deal or which club sells the most tickets. It's about other things besides. And that's part of government policy, government strategy. And Africa, I think, has to look to do things in a similar way. I'm not saying the same way as China, but in a similar way. In other words, taking a different conception. Now, having said all of that, I'm now going to say, come back to Ade, your first point about money, and I think it's a really, really important one, because for every Chelsea shirt that's sold, for every satellite TV subscription that's paid, that is a leakage from the African economy, and somebody somewhere, possibly in London or New York, is going to be the beneficiary of that. And just to give you a sense of the magnitude of what the business of football can actually mean, and I am going to use the Premier League. So it's thought that on an annual basis, the Premier League sustains something like 103,000 jobs in Britain. It's thought to generate somewhere in the region of about £3.4 billion in tax revenue every year in Britain. So yes, football can be sociocultural. Yes, it can serve community purposes. It can serve purposes of learning and development. But there is an economic contribution there. And as I say, one of the things that Africa has to be thinking about, I think, is rather than that economic benefit leaking out of its economy or its various constituent parts, is to look towards a Pan-African or even an individual state policy strategy relating to football that isn't just about playing. It's also about sociocultural development. It's about economic development. It's also, and Brian, we've talked about this before as well. We talked about soft power earlier, but it's also about the political development, the political context within which African football is delivered. And I'm not talking about officials arguing with each other. African football has power around the world. The Nigerian shirt had power around the world. Didier Drogba has got power around the world. We know that the Chinese invest into African stadiums because there is a reason to do so. There is a political reason to do so. And so I think in being sociocultural and economic, there is a need also for African football to be more political in its orientation and to try and benefit from that.
This is an opportunity for me to now introduce our panelists who's just joined us, Miss Cleopatra and Ketia, the owner of Ridge City Football Club, the women.